As I boarded a plane last night to come, when we were halfway to the airport, they told us the flight was an hour delayed because of weather here. We got to the airport, it was delayed another hour because of the weather. We got on the plane, they delayed it another 45 minutes. And I said to them, y'all must not know the chair of the caucus. I got to get out. And a couple of them seemed impressed, but they said there's nothing they could do. And they delayed another half hour. And I want you to know I went up in the cockpit and I told the pilot, have you met white chocolate? And 10 minutes later, we took off, and here I am. I want to say that I congratulate Governor Newsom, not because he won an election, but because he has shown a commitment to the things that I believe that many of us want to see in elective office. And when we see who is in the White House and see who's in the State House in California, you could not have a greater contrast. So let me give a belated congratulations to Governor Gavin Newsom. One of the things that has become, to me, one of the great downsides of American culture is we have a way of robbing the meaning of holidays. We allowed commercial interests to have Santa Claus kidnap the baby in the manger on Christmas. We allowed a bunny rabbit to rob Jesus of the resurrection. And if we are not careful, we will allow people to dilute Martin Luther King, where King Day will be about some self-righteous and empty kumbayas, rather than dealing with the issues of social and economic justice that Dr. King stood for. There will be people all over America on Monday that will be locking arms, singing "We Shall Overcome," not knowing Dr. King didn't sing "We Shall Overcome" in great Gothic cathedrals or in great legislative halls. He sung them in the back roads of Mississippi. He sung them facing terror in Alabama. He went to the point of action because he had a reason to sing, because he was fighting issues they had to overcome. So when you hear and see these people bathed in self-piety, singing "We Shall Overcome" on Monday, ask them, what are they trying to overcome? Sitting up in comfortable rooms, sitting up ignoring the continued bias based on race, based on gender, based on sexual orientation. You have nothing to overcome. In many ways, you are mocking those that had to overcome you not being involved. Not only did Dr. King had to overcome the hostility of the South, he had to overcome the silence of the North and the negligence of those on the West. He had to overcome the co-signers of bigotry. It was easy to condemn Bull Connor. It was easy to condemn Lester Maddox in the South. It's more difficult to ask why Hollywood was so white and exclusionary. It was more difficult to ask why Wall Street and those with pinstripes in Upper Manhattan or Midtown and Upper East Side Manhattan had a racist institutional entrenchment that was just as bad as it was in Mississippi. And when Dr. King went north, he said the worst racism he saw was in Chicago dealing with open housing. When Dr. King went north, he was not welcomed in New York. Senator was reading my bio. I joined youth department of his New York chapter. I was from the north, grew up in Brooklyn. My mother, because I was a minister, was afraid I'd get in the militant crowd. She brought me to the preachers. They made me the youth director of his organization. He was killed about 8 months later. It was not popular, even among my contemporaries, to be a part of Dr. King's organization. Now, it is everybody that fought the holiday are going to be giving keynote addresses on Monday. I was so glad that Brother Secretary, my answer to Madam Secretary on TV, Brother Secretary Alex, read about how they failed, even in California, to pass the holiday 3 times. Let's not sit up here and pretend everybody loved Dr. King. He's right, 75% negative rating when he died. Because Dr. King taught there are 2 types of leaders. There are thermometers and there are thermostats. Thermometers judge the temperature in the room. Thermostats change the temperature in the room. Some of you come in a room to judge the temperature, get everybody's pulse, and go along to get along. Some of us come in the room because we have a vision in mind and a purpose to fulfill. And it may not make everybody like you, but it makes you be able to go to sleep at night and put your head on the pillow knowing you fulfilled the reason you're here. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes that to everything there's a time and a purpose. You were not an accident. You were born for a purpose. You can duck it, you can fulfill it, or you can never find it, but God doesn't make a mistake. If you travel as much as I do, you see everything in nature operates in complete order. Sun never bumped into the moon. Planets never bumped into each other. So why do you think God got to you and made his first mistake? You are not a mistake. You're here for a reason. The question is, do you have the courage to stand up for that reason? So celebrating Dr. King ought to be to celebrate the King in you. And the King in you is to fulfill the purpose that you're here for, whether it makes people comfortable or not. Don't emulate a king, be a king. Being a king may mean you're going to have to deal with the 19% poverty that the governor talked about. Being a king means you're going to have to deal with the fact that in the state of California in 2019, we have people getting rashes for taking baths. Being a king may mean that you're going to have to question what happened with Stephon Clark a year ago in March. Being a king may mean you're going to have to stand up to the most polarized and bigoted presidency we've seen in our lifetime. From a pinstripe Manhattan resident, not one in overalls from Mississippi. Donald Trump is just the same kind of dressed up institutional bigotry that we've seen and Dr. King fought. Oh, I know Donald Trump. I've marched on him, I've picketed him, and I've met with him. And Trump knows that there's an element out here that will support that bigotry. There's no accident that he's talking about a wall on the Mexican border when there are more people that have been recorded coming across the Canadian border that was questioned for terrorism. He's not talking about Border Patrol. He's talking about Mexican Border Patrol. He's talking about them that are different. Yes, we need border security. Yes, we need to have immigration policies. But building walls and showing how we can punish them and calling them racist, calling them rapists, is blatant appeal to race. How can you celebrate King Day and not call it like it is? You can't celebrate Dr. King and allow them to distort that Martin Luther King marched with Cesar Chavez, and the children of Dr. King and the children of Chavez are under attack in this administration. You can't celebrate Dr. King and not deal with, in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here? He talked about police. And when we came and dealt in Sacramento and stand with the grandmother Stephon Clark, now just asking for justice and fairness, that you're celebrating Dr. King, but we're troublemakers? Oh, here they come starting trouble. No, we come to stop trouble. Shooting people in the backyard of their grandmother's house is trouble. Having poverty at the level the governor outlined is trouble. Don't get angry if people call for folk from the outside to come in and you attack us for coming. If you were doing their job, they wouldn't be calling us, they'd be depending on you. Reverend Porter, who heads our Sacramento National Action Network, and I were talking this morning, and we were talking about the promise of this state. The promise is not that you have newly elected people, but a new vision, a vision that we have got to tackle the problems together. Now, some folk on the right and the left, you'll never satisfy. But you've got to be able to confront the issues of poverty and unfairness, and you've got to be willing to do it together. We cannot continue the way we're going, because we are more polarized and divided than ever. And the people that benefit from that are the people on both extremes. This is not the first time this has happened. I've been reading David Blight's book on Frederick Douglass. When Lincoln decided to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, and he signed it because he was told that the only way we will win against the Confederates in these next battles is we need more manpower. You need to free the slaves and let them join the Union Army. And Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and freed the slaves only in Confederate states. They didn't free the slaves in the Union states. How come out the Union state up there with Trump? They didn't free us with the Emancipation Proclamation. And when they freed the slaves and allowed them to arm, they won the battle. And January 1st, 1863 was the date that they were to be free. Watch night that we have in black churches. You ever notice why black churches have watch night different than other churches? Because we were not waiting on New Year's to get drunk. We were waiting on New Year's to see if Lincoln would keep his promise that we would be free on January 1st. Now, I know these new prosperity preachers got y'all thinking New Year's was about the boogie woogie. New Year's was about whether Lincoln would keep his promise. Fast forward, January 1st, 1863, August 28, 1963, 100 years later, that is why the March on Washington was at Lincoln Memorial. They didn't go to the Washington Monument. They didn't go to Jefferson's Memorial. Why did they have the march at Lincoln's Memorial? Because Dr. King said, we come to ask Mr. Lincoln, will America keep their promise? You kept your promise about the Emancipation Proclamation, but will you keep your promise to protect our voting rights? You promised full citizenship. And if you read the whole speech, not just the end of the speech, a lot of y'all don't wake up in church till we get to the end of the sermon and do the theatrics. If you read the whole speech, it was about Lincoln keeping his promise. That's why they were at the Lincoln Memorial. That's why they didn't go to the other monuments. That's why that march wasn't at the White House, because Lincoln made a promise. Well, I came 3,000 miles to say to you that are members of the Black Legislative Caucus, to the governor, to the secretary, you promised that if people put you in office, that you would change the inequality in California. You promised that you'd speak up where others had been silent before you. You promised that you would implement and execute what people like Dr. King and Robert Kennedy and others gave their life for. You promised. Didn't nobody come drag you out of bed and beg you to come and take an office? You promised. You promised that the Stephon Clarks would have the same right to justice as any child in Beverly Hills or Bel Air. You promised. And the challenge on King Day is, will you keep your promise? Dr. King did what he did. What will you do? Do you have a title that you can't live up to? Did you take a seat that your butt can't cover? Then you shouldn't have stood up and took a position that you were not qualified to hold. Yes, people paid a price to open the door so you could be what they would never be. Your grandma, your mama cleans the bedrooms and beds of people that now got to come and lobby you. They didn't clean them bedrooms hoping you would sell out, hoping that you'd be impressed that you in the room. They thought if they would just wipe one more floor and clean one more toilet, that my son or my daughter will get in there and make a difference for us. You owe because you received. You have a debt because you are living on the prerogatives of those that gave to you what they could not give themselves. So don't celebrate Dr. King, be a king. And think about how Dr. Martin Luther King, unlike many in his generation, he had things that his contemporaries didn't have. His father was a big preacher, sent him to Morehouse College, and then sent him north to an Ivy League, Boston University. He had a PhD from Boston University in the 50s, when most blacks couldn't even get into Boston University. But he didn't decide to go into academia. He turned around for some reason and went back to the Deep South, to Montgomery, Alabama, and became a pastor of a little church. But history caught up with him, because not long after he got there, a lady who never could make a great speech and never wrote a great book, named Rosa Parks, refused to give up her seat. And Dr. King didn't let his status, his pedigree, or his lineage get in the way of him standing up to fulfill the promise his father saw in him. Don't hide behind your title, work your title. Don't hide behind your rank, work your rank. Who cares how educated you are if you're not doing anything with the education? Who cares how much influence you have if you're not using that influence? We are in a critical point in the history of this country. 800,000 workers not getting paid because of a wall built on ego, a vanity wall that has nothing to do with Border Patrol. I'm walking through airports with TSA workers working, not knowing where they're going to get a paycheck, going into communities with people that have no paycheck coming, tainted water in the land of the free and the home of the brave, from California to Flint, Michigan. And you sitting up brushing off your plaque on your desk talking about your title. You are the Secretary of Irrelevance. You are the chairman of self-delusion. You don't matter unless you make your title matter. Senator said, I did the eulogy at Michael Jackson's funeral. I'll never forget, and I'll leave you with this. I was coming out the cemetery that night as we had put Michael in his mausoleum, and a well-known artist, Governor, if I would call his name, everybody would know it. He came up to me kind of teary-eyed and said, Reverend Al, I really was moved by your eulogy. I said, well, thank you. He said, no, it really touched me. I said, well, thank you. He says, and if I go first, I want you to do a eulogy for me just like that. I said, well, you're going to have to give me something to work with. I'm going to tell you, my fraternity brother here will tell you the hardest job of a preacher, Reverend Porter tell you this, is to preach the funeral of an irrelevant person. That's a hard job. They roll the body down the aisle, lay it out in front of the pulpit, family sitting up there crying and carrying on. And we supposed to get up and hallucinate a life you ain't never lived. You know, I quit doing everybody's funeral. I'm very selective. Because I ran out of lies to tell over folk. Most folks should go straight from the cemetery to the morgue, or morgue to the cemetery, because most folk ain't done nothing we could say. You got you a nice house. Well, it'll be on sale in a day or two. You got you a nice car. Well, we'll ride all over town in your car, change the bill of sales later. You should ask yourself every day, if this is my last day, what will they say about me? What difference did I make? What did I stand for? What was the meaning of my journey? That's what King Day's about. King Day's about you looking in the mirror and assessing, have you kept your promise? Or have you just been one to take it all in for your own selfish and your own self-aggrandizement? The nerve of you to sit high, lifted by those that took low so they could exalt you. It's not that there's not work to be done. It's that unlike others, too many that ought to be working are too busy profiling. We live in the selfie generation. We take selfies, but you don't have to live a selfie life. The world is beyond you. That's what Dr. King was able to master. That's why Mrs. King used to tell me how when Martin was going to elementary school in Atlanta, Georgia, he couldn't go to the white schools. When he was trying to do things, he was barred by segregation. And she would tell me the horrors of how she grew up in Marion, Alabama, and he grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, one night I was flying into Detroit with Martin Luther King III. We do a lot together. We'll be together Monday for our National Action Network celebration. And I don't know, but it hit me as we were descending, getting ready to land in Detroit. I said, you know something, Martin? He said, what? I said, I know your father died, was killed at 39, never saw his 40th birthday, left a beautiful wife and 4 children. He never knew if y'all married, never knew if y'all went to college, never knew what became of you. You were all very young when he got killed. I know they had to raise money, Harry Belafonte and others, to pay for his funeral and to take y'all through life. But at the end, Martin, he won. Martin looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, think about it. The school that wouldn't let him go and attend because of the color of his skin. Do you realize that on Monday, every school in America is closed to celebrate your father's birthday? He won. The courthouse that they dragged him up the stairs, and your mother would show us pictures of him handcuffed, being dragged up the courthouse stairs. That courthouse will be closed Monday. Judge can't come to work. The clerks got to stay home to celebrate your daddy's birthday. At the end of the day, if you give all you got, God will reward you with more than you can imagine. So when you see America close down Monday, it's not because Trump closed the government, it's because King with love made the whole nation celebrate the child of Jim Crow that kept his promise and stood on who he was and not hid behind who he was. Keep your promise.